So then this is when folks are just kind of like, okay, so you told me that I suck. What? And this is the biggest complaint of every race thing you've ever done, right? It's like, well, what am I supposed to do about it? So the thing is that we actually have evidence-based interventions for implicit bias. It's just that we don't know about it because we don't pay any attention to any journals outside of medicine. So then the social psychologists were like, we've been studying this for years, guys. We'll publish in your journals, so then you can at least read it. So if you guys have not seen the Journal of Internal Medicine, it's a really great journal. One of sort of the 6 things that they sort of summarized in terms of evidence interventions, and they use a lot of like words that I don't understand. For example, they say, enhance internal motivation and avoid external pressure to reduce bias. So that means doing would do and should do exercises. So those clinical vignettes, you know, like going through them and then being like, oh, this is what I did and this is what I should have done. Oh, sorry. Understanding the psychological basis of bias. So we know that studies show that like when people try to fight stereotyping, it rebounds and it's worse, right? So simply understanding that implicit bias and stereotype is part of human nature and actually something that's really important for us to live is helpful. Enhance emotional regulation skills specific to promoting positive emotions. So that's just like when people are happy, they're like less racist. Increased perspective taking and effective empathy. So those are sort of like walk a mile in my shoes exercises. Improve ability to build partnership with patients. That's sort of what we talk about in terms of trying to break down hierarchy. Enhance providers' confidence in their ability to successfully interact with socially dissimilar patients. So I mean, basically, you have to interact with different types of people more often. And so what does this actually look like, right? Because it's hard to imagine when you first think about these, like what this will look like in your clinic. What does that mean? And how do we operationalize these things? So like we talk about QI, right? That it's not helpful to like just tell someone that they shouldn't make that mistake. What's more helpful is figuring out a way that a system can help support them from not making that mistake, right? So what can we do? So if like for example, Thumby actually does this thing where before every single patient, when she puts her hand on the doorknob, she takes a second, she breathes, and she pictures what that patient had to get through to get to her clinic that day. Every single patient, just across the board, right? And that will help her with her implicit bias and obviously race, but then like lots of other things as well, right? Because the more we personalize our patients, the more it happens. And so this is Sonia Boone from Northwestern. She says, when you start operationalizing diversity and place it into the priorities of the organization, you start to see results. And so the other systems things that I feel so passionate about and really important is about diversity, right? Because diversity is a systemic way to make people more comfortable interacting with different people, right? It means that our white colleagues can just come to work, right? They don't have to go out of their way to hang out with people who are not white, who are outside the group. And then for everyone, like, it really just helps, like, so we're talking about, like, stare at things that help break down your implicit bias, right? And so when you walk around and there's a really kick-ass nephrologist who has, like, a strong accent from, like, I don't know, somewhere, and you can't even tell what they are, but you know they're not white, like, that breaks down this understanding that we have that folks like that are just refugees and don't know anything, right? And it decreases intergroup anxiety. Because let's be real, like, whenever you're encountered with someone who you are not used to interacting with, even if you don't want to have your bias, half of your brain is like, don't say anything that's like offensive, like what are the offensive things for these people? Like, make sure you make eye contact, but don't make too much eye contact, right? That's half of your brain that could be thinking about medicine, right? Or interacting with them on a human level, right? So the more that we interact with people who are different, the more that implicit bias goes down. And so those are the things for me that like is one of the major systematic interventions we can make, right? In addition to all of the other benefits, obviously. So what else can we do? What are other examples of the ways that this turns out? So Gardner and Dovadia, they're Santa Rosa, I think. I think the Santa Rosa Residency does this, where why is it that in the one-liner race is so important? Right? And then where did that race come from? It was just like, I eyeballed you, right? And I was like, she's South Asian. I don't know. You know? Because when we put it in the first one-liner, that gives it so much more weight than it really deserves, right? Sure, maybe you want to bring in the social history because we know that impacts things, but the danger of that is so high. And actually what they say is, So now when they do their one-liner, you have to include a social fact about them. Like, Miss Smith is 74 years old with hypertension, and she really enjoys biking. Because not only does that prevent us from having racial stereotypes, it helps personalize our patients in a positive way. Checklist, checklist. Checklist manifesto, right? The thing about checklists, I would say, that's really important is you have to be careful about creating what your checklists are, right? So if your checklist has racial issues inherently embedded in it, for example, our guidelines, not going to be helpful, right? But for example, one of the checklists that I've created in my life is whenever I see a patient who's not getting the outcome that I would be expecting based on what we've done, we go through a checklist of things, right? Are they taking their medication? Are there barriers to that medication? Are there other history of things that we're missing? And the thing that I'm adding into that is there any sort of implicit bias or racism between me and the patient that could be impacting what's happening? Practices like the meets they're sort of talking about with the hand on the door. Trainings and exercises, and so one of the things that we've been trying to do with this residency is that, like, you know, initially this curriculum started as like this one talk, and then we're like, well, these exercises, you need booster shots, right? And so keeping them in a regular space and giving you the space to work on them, and then schedule spaces. You know, like, not instead of adding this on as something else that you're supposed to do, like really recognizing that this is so important. Like, if there were a disease that caused this much morbidity and mortality, like, it would be on all the boards, right? Like, we would have ACGME requirements about it, people would be doing their CCCs about it, but it's not. And so really trying to give it the space that it deserves given the health